I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 4, recorded on September 13th, 2018. Theme Thursday is a Gallup Webcast series that dives deep into the Clifton Strengths theme one at a time, and today's theme is Intellection. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room, a rockin' chat room today. It's available for you. A little too rockin' for an election, but it's available for you right below the main video window. Just take a peek down there. Bottom left-hand corner, it says log in. Choose the guest account. Take your name out. Put your name in. It'll say guest. Take that out. Put your name in. Hit submit. You can log in with any social media account as well. Works really great. Best way to get your comments or questions into the chat room, and best way to communicate with us during the post show, which you can't do the post show unless you come to the live show. It's the only place you can get it. If you are listening to the recorded version, or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for anything, any questions, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. For all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs, you can also catch the video in both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening. We call that podcasting. If you haven't got into it, it's the future, by the way. You want to do that, it's available on your iPhone or Android. Just look for the podcast app that is available there. Click it, search for Gallup, and you will see all our webcasts that are out there. Or I've made super easy buttons for you, literally one click, and you can subscribe. Available on our coaches blog. Go to coaching.gallup.com. Go to the resources tab and look under podcasts. Maika Leibbrandt is our host today. She works as a workplace consultant here at Gallup. And Maika, always great to be back with you. Second Theme Thursday of the day. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
No, good to have you. We have had a busy day, and we're excited to be here today. We're talking about intellection, and 27 for me, so not high on the list. I'm an activator, mover, that kind of way. So those are really what I'm best at. But we're excited to bring intellection to those listening, both on the podcast and live. Let's talk a little bit about it and dive in.
Sure. And even if Jim and I don't personally bring intellection, we will bring some great love for the theme of intellection. It's a strategic thinking theme. And when you think about defining it, the short definition is intellection describes a great depth of consideration. So people high in this theme enjoy the process of bringing perspective through thinking. They're able to and also attracted to processing information from every possible angle. They might be described as contemplative, persistent, intentional.
We think about the best of us. What do we bring? How do we serve? Let's talk a little bit about that with intellection.
Sure. If you've got high intellection, you can really bring the offering of perspectives that other people may have missed. Again, it's about that mulling over an idea, being able to explore it from angles that other people may not even know exist, discovering insights that go beyond just sort of accepting truth at face value. I also think about the value of intellection being the ability to generate curiosity, even in other people. And that's, again, where we talk about how does it go beyond just a behavior maybe that you have and translate into a service that you can provide for others. Think about how you can train people to get excited about being curious, how you can start to plant some of those seeds. That curiosity can lead to learning. It can lead to development. It can lead to improvement. I also think about intellection as being able to understand causes, connections, and consequences that, of course, are going to lead us to doing better work in the future.
Yeah, I love that triplet they have there, understanding causes, connections, and consequences that lead to better work. I love the fact that it has a real emphasis on better work, right?
Well, all of this really is talking not just about what intellection is as a state of being, but it's talking about what's the byproduct if you're doing it on purpose. And I think, every theme has the danger or the potential of just staying in this the being space and not moving over to doing, as our friend Kurt would have talked about it. But specifically with intellection, don't just think about it as, wow, I've got a big brain and I love to use it and it's really fun. I think it's our challenge, if you've got high intellection, to say, how do I use this behavior that makes me a bigger thinker than others, that makes me able to process or hold more information probably in my head at once than others, that makes me more persistent at going deeper? How do I use it to create something? Because intellection on its own is not an executing theme. It's not even an influencing theme. It doesn't have to do any of this. season 4 and our effort as coaches is to say, how do you make this useful? How do you translate it into success?
Yeah. So with that in mind, what can we do more of?
Sure. Think about doing more in-depth discovery, more research, more consideration. Look for opportunities that are going to allow you to go deeper or process further about a specific subject. So that might be focus groups, improvement initiatives, maybe even customer analysis or a product analysis. It's different than raising your hand for brainstorming. Raise your hand for how can I take our collective understanding even further. Also, look for perhaps revisiting existing ideas rather than creating new ones. You're going to bring depth to things that have time to percolate in your own brain. So it's even, I think, worthwhile to reflect on your own thoughts, reflect on your own discoveries, and look toward what you've already learned or what you've already taken in as being really fertile ground for growing new discoveries.
Mike SP in the chat room, she says there are people who do not like thinkers. We take a little bit of getting used to. And I think there's a little bit of negative bias kind of in this idea. Sometimes, we often talk about in the use of these, it's just as important as how we come across. And we've even thrown out the idea of asking for permission before using your superpowers. In other words, I've always appreciated when thinkers, and I'm not a big thinker, I'm a big doer. I'm a motion guy. I like to get things in motion. But I've always appreciated my friends who I've been able to, who are thinkers and who've asked, hey, like, you're going to do this. I'd like to think about this with you. I'd like to partner and think about some of the things. Would you be willing to slow down a little bit so we can kind of think this through? Not just bringing those thoughts, or sometimes even after the fact, bringing those thoughts to me. They don't do me any good if I've already activated on it. But I need to know someone else is thinking about it. And so I think one of those really awesome actions that thinkers can do is to ask for permission and just say, hey, I want to think about this with you. Would you be willing to do that? They won't always say yes, but I think oftentimes us activators and movers, we appreciate that. Like let's partner on this thing together. What do you think of that?
Let's not assume that that's negative. I think about some of the greatest leaders in my life have been thought partners. Right. And so people who I even seek out to say, help me think about this, help me sort through this, help me. And of course, I have high communication. So the way it's going to sound is I want to talk. But really, the value that I'm looking for is somebody to give me different perspective. I also think we have to challenge the notion that intellection is always slow or that it always requires breaks. Great. I think intellection can be agile. Intellection, similar to strategic in many ways, it can follow complex ideas, and there's some quickness in that piece. So I think it's too simple to say, oh, if you're intellection, you're a thinker, and that equals you need time to go off on your own and like climb a mountain and be alone with your thoughts. That being said, the perspective and the depth that comes typically when people with high intellection do get time to be intentional about going to those depths of their brain or researching things outside of their own understanding, usually helps. And so I think about it as how to not instead of thinking, gosh, I'm a thinker, how do I convince somebody else that that's good? Think about times when you've needed a thinker and how you already know that had value.
No, right on. How do we do more? What should be with those with high intellection? What kind of things can they be raising their hand for?
Well, I think we talked about raising your hand for discovery. Really, how do you curate that environment in order to be able to do it? You might want to get in touch with what your best recipe is for processing. For many people with intellection, it is time. But perhaps based on your other themes, maybe it's people, maybe it's information, maybe it's out loud conversation. I would say typically time does play a part, but it doesn't have to be a passive, like, let me wait and see how I feel about this in the future. Intellection's an active it's a muscle. It's something that you're flexing. So ask yourself, what are you spending time doing when you have your best discoveries? And be able to understand that as being the environment that you need in order to bring that value to other people, and be brave enough to ask, not just for, hey, can I go intellect about this, but specifically say, I'm going to need 3 more sources, or I'm going to need 5 days, or I'm going to need to ask somebody I trust to have an intellectual discussion with me about this. Ask for that. I also think ask for clarity when people want your feedback? Do they just want your initial reaction, or are they willing to give you, do they want you to give it some thought? I think agree in that moment up front on what it is that you'll deliver and why it will be good perhaps for them to wait.
How do we help them? What are the best environments that support this kind of talent?
I think it is giving some space, giving some understanding of how you're going to process, giving some ability to say, like you mentioned, Jim, what do I need to introduce? How do I ask for permission before this intellection introduces me, and make sure that there is a lot of that clarity.
So, what can we worry less about? This has been an interesting question we've asked a lot. By the way, Chris Townsend, I met with him this week and we were talking, and Chris listened to I think it was season 3, and he realized we have these patterns that we go through, and Chris put together a whole bunch of notes kind of based on the patterns. So, Chris, I appreciate you recognizing the patterns that we follow here. But one of those is, what should we, high in intellection, what should we worry less about?
That's one of my favorite questions. Who are you just not, unless it comes from other themes? But intellection by itself, worry less about being really excellent on the fly. I've heard people with high intellection say things like, I have delayed empathy, or I'm smarter after the conversation ends. It's okay to offer greatness that extends beyond that fleeting moment. You can still participate in the moment as well without having to have all the answers. So this is sort of a two-piece of dessert here. First is, don't think that you're going to have to be excellent in the moment. Don't set yourself up to be excellent in the moment. That might mean you need to set the expectation that you'll have follow-up conversations more often with people, or that you're going to create some sort of a routine that says we're going to check back in, or we're going to think about this more in the future. Or maybe in the heat of an argument, you just say, I'm not thinking my clearest right now. Let's wait to finish this until we can both get some space. The second part of that dessert is, in the moment, don't remove yourself. If you know that you need to go have some deep thoughts about what's being talked about, become the smartest question asker and turn that moment into a part of your intellectualizing. Turn that into part of your discovery process of your research. I would also say, don't worry about being easily won over or easily convinced. You, with high intellection, are going to know the difference of something at face value and something with real thought behind it. So you don't ever have to be quick to agree or quick to disagree.
I like your concept. I haven't really thought of it this way, but I love your concept that intellection doesn't always have to be slow. Its velocity can be fast, and its velocity can be fast when pre-thought. So in other words, anticipating, there may be some other talents in there that play to this, but anticipating some of these things that may come up and have already pre-thought them through. You talk about that?
Yeah, and I think it's also about realizing what you already know. So intellection stays open all the time to wanting to process through thoughts. I think you need to remind yourself, if you've got high intellection, that there might be thoughts that you've already become the expert in the room on. So be willing to trust all the thinking that you've already done. And that might mean just categorizing, where is your specialty? Being able to say or introduce yourself as, hey, I know a lot about XYZ. Please come ask me about it. And then don't fall into the trap of thinking you don't know enough, because there's this infinite, beautiful black hole of more thinking you can always do. In some spaces, you might want to think about being comfortable with saying, what do you know enough about to teach someone else? Or what have you thought enough about to be able to speak eloquently in a way that furthers the conversation? I think you're going to be disappointed in yourself if you say, what do you know everything there is to know about? Or what have you thought every thought there is to think about? But don't hesitate from taking that first step that drives a project forward, or that improves a relationship, or that helps you do more work, just because there is this vast amount that you still could think about. Think about, what can you specialize in, and how can you front load that so that so that other people are getting the benefit of the great thinking you've already done.
Yeah, and I think, Maika, that may circle around to what should I worry less about. And I think that's knowing everything. Like, you don't have to have thought through everything. It's okay. Give us where you're currently at. Like, what have been your thoughts to date on, give me what you have now. that may be hard because people want to think through. That's, those folks. No, I need to. Well, we need to handle this right now. So what do you have right now, and worry less about having to know everything. There's, like you said, chances are you've thought through good chunks of this. And in the moment, those may be good enough for the situation, right? To be able to provide value in that situation.
I think it's just knowing what the expectations are, because that could be soul crushing to some people right now who are hearing this with Intellection. It could sound like, wow, you just do a halfway job. But I also think you need to be very clear about when we need perfection and when we need progress. And when that progress is something that you'll still get to come back to and do a second or third or fourth draft, and when it's just got to be good enough to move on. So I think what we're tap dancing around, that I'll just say out loud here, is sometimes Intellection can just ruminate forever, and that's not helpful. So there are times when it is helpful, but be able to just be very clear with your partners who you're working with of, hey, how do we help move forward? What is it that we need to do right now? And how can we use pieces of this superpower to help us do that?
And I almost want to say, sometimes when you're in those situations and you feel rushed into thinking, that you say this phrase, I'm going to tell you what I think, but I reserve the right to come back after I spent some more time. I love that kind of form of communication to say, hey, look, I am not as comfortable as I want to be right now doing this. It's making me a little uncomfortable. I know from a velocity standpoint, you need it. You need these ideas right now, but I want to tell you I have more to do. From my side of the fence, when we're going to talk about working with Intellection here, I really appreciate that, knowing in that person, like, they're going to do it. They're going to think through it some more. They're going to spend some more time working through that process. And I appreciate that. So I want to, if you have that point in Intellection and you stumble at that point and you're like, no, I lock up or I get really frustrated, just communicate out and say, hey, look, I reserve the right to think some more about this.
I think some of the power behind all of these strategic thinking themes is the ability to understand where we are in a thought process. It's not as black and white or straightforward as understanding where we are in a product process or in a race, right? But a lot of these strategic thinking themes, it's like you've got your own map of how much thinking is yet to be done, what kind of thinking we've already done, what sort of information we've gathered, where we're going. And I think one of the greatest things we can do for people with high strategic thinking themes is just to find a way to translate that map to other people. So, have you formed an opinion on this? Are you still forming an opinion? Are you halfway through this? Have you just started? Just being able to have that discussion around, like you said, Jim, I'm gonna tell you where I am right now, and I'm gonna come back and amend that perhaps later, or I reserve the right to change my mind. I think everybody feels better if we just understand where we are.
Yeah, no, good. Let's talk some more about that when we're working with Intellection. What should we expect? What can we look for?
Expect a conscientiousness, which is a fun word to say and an even more fun word to type. If you haven't done it, you should try and type it out right now and just see it, because what you'll see is con, meaning with, and science. So with science, it's a desire to do things well, but also to have a system for thinking through things, not just to take an idea lightly. So that conscientiousness that you can expect when you're working with people with high intellection helps you say, I'm not just going to believe what runs in front of me. I'm going to be a part of doing the thinking and the proving and the analysis. Expect a depth of curiosity. They may help other people discover things through their questions that are probably going to go further than most. Expect them to be both, and very few people are this way, both interesting and interested. One of my favorite partners at Gallup has high intellection, and it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. He can find a way to ask me a question about that topic that I had never considered. And it does two things. One, it gives him this wealth of knowledge that I'm sure he feels like he's never alone because he's got his thoughts. But it also is a really great relationship building tool, because nobody likes anything more than they like being listened to, except for maybe a really great dessert. But that ability to be interested because you're seeing seeds of potential thought all around you. It's a really beautiful superpower.
Mike McDonald and I have been spending weeks now going through the Q12 for Coaches series that we're doing through the Call to Coach channel. If you haven't caught up on those, you might want to. We spend a lot of time talking about recognition. And this is one of those, I think, for coaches, and especially coaches who are coaching managers. We have a whole series on this. Every webcast, we've talked about recognition. By the way, as a manager, your superpower to help people be more productive is recognition.
Sure.
Not getting a good recognition program in there, and you're not doing it in some kind of consistent, formal way. We've given you all the clues on how to do this with people who have these themes. Maika, when we think about recognition, what do we think about for Intellection?
Sure. For folks with high intellection, look for times that they've noticed something that other people missed. Maybe recognize they've likely elevated the understanding of something very specific within your team. So, what is their intellectual specialty? What is it that they know a lot about? How can you celebrate their expertise and celebrate their thoughtfulness?
How do we push, how do we push it? Because it seems almost sometimes we talk about it like it's fully formed. Like they're thinkers, they're great thinkers.
That's it. Just go think,
They're
right?
good. But
Yeah, they're a Rodin sculpture, right? They're just thinking all day long. I think there's more to it, right? You can get better at this. I think two pieces to how to stretch an election. The two pieces are advise and strategize. Under the advise column, position them as wisdom partners to other people. What is it that they specifically could shed some light on? And really, this is going to sound a lot like input, but squeeze out everything that they've been able to think about in the past and have it benefit others. The strategize side of things, ask them to consider a challenge that your team currently faces. Maybe it's the opportunity to really outline or structure where the opportunities are to better explore some concepts. They're typically going to be pretty conceptual thinkers. So ask them and give them availability to, hey, this is the underscoring or the underlying message that we're trying to get across, or this is the philosophy that we want to follow, and really help them be sort of your quality check in the war room of planning for what is it that we need to better understand before we move forward.
As we're working with them, what's the best way to partner? How do we support them?
Okay, so I can't get over my image that I have of Intellection, which is my favorite independent coffee house in Lincoln, Nebraska, that I went to with a group of friends in college all the time. We actually had this commitment to just go have deep conversations. And in my head, when I think about that, we were wearing like very beatnik outfits and probably smoking. Like that is, I imagine like beanies and deep thoughts in a indie coffee house. And that's what I have in mind still when I characterize an election. And I don't mean for that to be dismissive of the power of it, but that idea of a salon, I think is beautiful, that we're going to get around, we're going to sit together and we're going to discuss things. So if you're going to be a good partner to someone with high intellection, show up at that salon with them. Make time with them to muse, to discuss, to explore without the expectation of we're here to move something forward. Give them time, give them space to consider things before you expect reaction, before you hold them to their opinion, but also feed them. I'm imagining a sign that says, feed the thinkers. Share what it is that you know. Share where you've been. Share how they can learn more about something that you know a lot about. But mostly it's just show up and think with them.
You're getting some questions from the chat room on this place. Is it the Mill? Is that the coffee house in Lincoln?
It's Coho. I did love the Mill, but it's the coffee house downtown. Thank you for guessing, everyone.
And Bar Show wants to know, there's beatniks in Lincoln?
No, there is in my imagination of what this looks like.
Listen, there's a few hippies in Lincoln. Let's just be clear about that. That there's where there are.
No. See, mine look like that creepy choreography song from White Christmas. Nobody's gonna get that, but we're talking like ultra characterized, total that's right. Imagination here.
That's right. Stereotype. We want to let's move into the dominant theme challenge. Just a couple reminders. One, we've been posting those on Instagram, and so if you're heading out there at Strengths Talk, we'll get you there if you're an Instagram fan. We also post them in the recorded post on in our coaches blog. So if you go to coaching.gallup.com and look up this one, season 4 Intellection, very bottom of the post are the theme challenges. We're also working on a series to collect these. I don't know, last week the universe converged and everybody collect these.
People wanted all of them.
You have homework to do, by the way, because we didn't do lesser theme challenges for the first couple. So I'm going to give you some.
No, you assigned me homework. I saw you cutely using your little woo and saying, maybe Maika will do that for everyone. I noticed that comment.
Guilty as charged. I did that as well. A little influence out there. Just throw it out into the ether. But as we think about these dominant theme challenges, let's work through here what we have for intellection.
Sure. So if intellection is high for you, your challenge to translate that into success is to find ways to think deep and think often. So I've given you three ways to do this. And if you try them, come back. Let us know how they go. Number one, listen to your thought wheel. Listen to where that hamster is running. So the challenge is to spend 5 to 7 minutes every morning this week in what I'm going to call active, alert silence. So just pay attention for at least 5 minutes, no more than 7. Pay attention to the thoughts that you're having. This isn't just about meditating, because I feel like a lot of times that's like trying to quiet your mind. Don't just quiet the rest of your space for 5 minutes every day and listen to what those thoughts are. Number 2, identify your best local thought partner, and invite them to discuss something specific without the expectation of solving or creating anything. That is going to be recognition of collaboration, by the way, and really great drop into somebody's bucket for you to say, hey, you're my good thought partner. Let's go think. Number 3 is to practice translating your thoughts in ways that people without intellection can easily understand them. So we're going to go old school, and I'm sure by the time anybody hears the recording, it'll feel like old school. We're going old school Twitter. What I want you to think about the most interesting thing that you've discovered lately and write it in 140 characters or less. I know Twitter now allows you longer, but I want original 140 characters or less on the most interesting discovery you've made.
I like that one. Kind of summarize it. I mean, it's the brilliance is not making simple things complicated, but making complicated things simple.
Yeah.
So I really like that third challenge. That's I don't have it. I can't do it. So I'm going to rely on you, my intellectual friends that are out there, kind of think through those. Okay, for those like you and me who don't have it, every once in a while we don't, Maika, where it's the two of us don't have it. But let's do the lesser theme challenge.
Sure. If intellection is a lesser theme for you and it's getting in the way, your challenge is just to understand how is it that you do process information? How do you make decisions? So 2 challenges if it's a lesser theme. First, I want you to build yourself a checkpoint into your decision process. Here's one way that I want you to try to do it. So oftentimes we make decisions, we classify the bigness of decisions by how much money we're spending. So next time you make a big purchase, I want you to gather data from 1 person you personally know, 2 consumer websites, and 3 customer reviews. So there's just an example of some checkpoints that are going to slow down your thought process. Again, a person you know, 2 consumer websites, 3 customer reviews. Second, you might just rely more on your gut than your head. And that's okay. So I want you to think about how you do that. What was the last decision that you felt certain of? Name how it was that you reached that certainty and what benefit your process was to other people.
I love number 1 from in this challenge. I actually do that quite a bit on the tech side. Don't do that for all decisions. So maybe I'll try and track one down. Maybe I need to buy a new coffee thing or buy a new lawnmower, a robot lawnmower kind of thing. Sorry, inside jokes there. Inside jokes. Okay.
We are so lame if our inside jokes include robot lawnmowers. Not that anyone who has an obsession with robot lawnmowers would be lame. They would be very, very cool.
I'm just saying.
Definitely on point.
If you follow me on YouTube on the tech side, you might see a new robot lawnmower coming up. Just saying.
I didn't know it was a thing. It's apparently a thing. Let's go intellectualize about that.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, final thoughts on intellection. What do you got?
You know, it's such a huge theme. I think it's really easy to simplify it. It's also really easy to misunderstand it and to think that if you don't have intellection, you're not intellectual. But I would challenge you to, if that something goes through your head, I'd challenge you to say, what does it you mean when you say intellectual? Do you mean smart? Because there's really no connection between that theme and whether or not you're smart. But define how, what is your access to being smart? because that's not necessarily tied up with intellection. That I do think is something that's really beautiful about intellection, is the ability to be smart in 360 different angles, right? 360 degrees of smart is what intellection is. But it's a challenging one in that it's so detailed, it's so deep, and it's so intrinsic. But when it can get out, that's when the beauty really happens. So on that note, I especially would really love to hear how these challenges go, or how other people have found helpful things to do to get that intellection out in a space that other people can benefit from.
No, good advice. Good advice going forward. Hey, before we sign off here, and I know this is super local to the time and date as of today. So if you're listening this later, it's happened some time ago. But we recently lost a compadre here at Gallup, Mark Pogue, who was a big advocate in the university space. Spent a lot of time in the Strengths Quest world, as well as was the director of our University Strengths Institute at the University CSI, Clifton Strengths Institute in Lincoln. Memorial services today. His funeral is tomorrow. He had an enormous impact, and I think in the future we'll have to continue to have an enormous impact. Mark had been a contributor to Called to Coach. I had interviewed him half a dozen times. And was battling cancer and overcame that. So we just want to say how much we appreciate Mark and the work that Mark has done on these channels and all the things that Mark meant to the strengths community. Many of you who listen knew Mark, and we just want to get the word out. And Jamie is doing well. Jamie and family is doing well. But we certainly want to thank the family and Mark for his contributions to what we do here, and appreciate him as well. Maika, anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I just think what a gift it is that we have this community around strengths. And Mark, in my opinion, was really the first one to start to create that community. He led Clifton Strengths when it was primarily a student-focused piece. I would say that he is the single reason that strengths are as strong in the student space as they've been. And really, that was our first audience when you think about strengths as a community, was that university and college setting. And it is thanks in no small part, in fact, I would say in 99%, to Mark Pogue. So so grateful for his influence on the universe.
Yeah, he will memorial service today at UNL, and that's significant, of course, because he helped open the Clifton Strengths Institute there. I'm kind of privileged this year to be able to help out and assist with what's going on there in his absence this fall and spring. And so a real privilege. We will I know the community's thoughts and prayers. We'll take those to that this weekend as we do those things. But we appreciate you guys supporting, and we'll just remember Mark and all the work that he did. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. Just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. Got some words to say if you've thought through some things. Get them on paper. Send them to us. Send us in an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line. That'll make its way over to Maika. Maika and I have been working on a new streamlined process.
Maybe in the post show, we'll talk about how Jim used his Jedi mind trick management talent on me to fix the blog.
Super great. It's always a work in progress. Send us those at coaching@gallup.com. We'll consider them. Don't forget, you can catch the audio and video, both downloadable and streaming. And we call that podcasting, available for you on our social resources page at the coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. Click on the resources tab. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, or you just need some training around strengths or engagement or all the things that we do, complete list of all the courses are available out there for you. Courses.gallup.com gets you there. If you have any questions, you can use the coaching email address to get you in. If you want to know what's going on live with us every single week, that address is gallup.eventbrite.com. And then don't forget to join our Facebook group. Almost 12,000. We're getting pretty close. Facebook.com/group/call2coach. Just ask to be invited in, and I will let you in. And we'd love to have a conversation with you. Really good group, by the way. You guys are doing a great job out there, and we appreciate your input. We're live on Thursdays, and we'd love to have you come out and join us live. I want to thank you for coming out today. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.